He's always got the time.
Is that because of his... I can't say that. He's got a watch. Have the size
We
of
can
his
zoom
watch.
into his watch. It's a great watch, but he's always got the time.
Episode 3 of The Watch is a trip down memory lane. As a kid, I was asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the answer was simple, a left footer. Tonight, I talk to the inspiration behind that, Melbourne champion, Brad Green. Greenie, it is great to see you. Firstly, thanks very much for your time. No doubt a very busy man at the moment. You're on the board of the Melbourne Footy Club, full-time work and a 4-month-old baby to add to the family. What's your schedule like at the moment?
Yeah, well, thanks for having us, Ben. It's nice to be out. What are we? Tuesday at 6:30. So it's nice to be out. Yeah, life's busy. As you said, family life now with Katie and the 3 boys. It's weird to say 3 boys, but yeah, we've got a 4-month-old, a 14 and 11. So life's pretty busy with work as well as being on the board of the footy club. So it's nice to be out and having a chat with you.
Are the 2 older boys into footy yet?
Yeah, both love the D's. Obviously, they passionate D's fans, and they have been since they were born. But Oliver, my oldest, is 14. Really passionate about his footy, loves playing it. But Wilbur, he's middle child now, not the youngest. He still loves the D's, but he's a soccer man. So there's potentially time for him to play footy. But no, he loves his soccer.
We'll get into your soccer career a little later on. That's always an interesting one. But you mentioned the board. How many hours sort of a week, or what's the schedule like for you around that?
It's consistent with a yearly term. It's certainly a 12-month thing. You probably have a little bit more respite with it over sort of the Christmas break with December, January. But the footy season's obviously a little bit busier. But now with AFLW, with the men's comp and the women's comp sort of intertwining with each other, and they overlap. So yeah, it is busy. I probably spend anywhere from 15, 20 hours a week with those, and depends on with phone calls and emails and meetings and Zooms and committee meetings and boards. So yeah, it does take up a bit of time, but when you're passionate about something, and that's why I do it. I'm passionate about the Melbourne Footy Club. They gave me an opportunity to be drafted and play AFL footy, and I just want to give back to the club.
Obviously, you spent so long there, 13 years, 254 games. Is it something that you always want to stay with?
No, I didn't always want to be a board member is the answer. I wanted to stay in footy. I think when you're playing AFL footy, it's great. It is the greatest sport in the world. It's fantastic to be a player, run on the MCG as your home ground every week, be a part of a change room and a bond with what you get with a playing group is unbelievable. And to feel that and keep that is hard for players when they're moving and transitioning into post their footy career. So that's where coaching took me, and still after coaching finished to be a part of the board was sort of that transition to keep involved. So yeah, it's sort of something that I've just sort of transitioned through going through post footy, but I've really enjoyed the last 4 years being on it.
How did you find the initial phase of retirement where you go from playing footy all day every day, you're kicking it non-stop? Do you keep up the skills? Do you go for a kick? Do you have a full break? Are you just over it? What's that like?
Yeah, I was certainly a lot fitter than I was. What am I, coming up 11, 12 years ago? End of 2012, I retired. So I tried to keep fit when I retired. I played a couple of games with, I'm originally being Tasmanian. I went back home and played with some mates at a club called University down there. So for about 4 or 5 years, I played probably 4 or 5 games a year with them. I didn't play with anyone else, and kept that up by just playing those games, and I really enjoyed that. And we ended up winning a flag, so it was my only flag that I won throughout my whole career. So I treasure that a little bit with my mates. But yeah, I just try and keep fit, have a kick with the boys, but there's nothing too strenuous in my fitness regime.
So you were drafted to the club 1999. What's it like back then? You see the professional standards of footy clubs now. Entering in that era, how did you find it?
Yeah, end of 99, it was sort of the transition into, part-time into full-time. I think the transition was about 3 or 4 years pre that was, the guys were still working. They were doing their weights in the morning. They'll go to work during the day, and then 4 or 5 they'd get there and train in the afternoon. So long days, long hours for those guys. But Yeah, no, I turned up in Melbourne, and knowing that you're getting it was the draft process. It was the year that we didn't have a first round draft pick. We lost our first round draft pick to Jeff White's salary cap when we did that. So coming into Melbourne, not knowing a lot about the footy club, being based out of Junction Oval, was a bit strange. Moving from Tassie, moving into the host family. And then training full time as your profession, it took a little bit of adjustment for this Tasmanian, but something that I was really passionate about to play AFL footy and wanted to work hard while I was there and do the utmost to make my way in the sport and be hopefully a good player.
What were the facilities like back then at Junction?
They were interesting. They're they were better at North Launceston where I got drafted from. You're looking at Junction, and literally we had to carry back in those days. The ice machine would break down, so the 40 was our head of fitness back then. Would say bring in a kilo of ice, your own ice bars, filling up your ice bins. It was totally different, but it was a footy club. It was very professionally run. Neil Danaher was my coach. Chris Fagan, who coaches Brisbane now, was an assistant. Brian Royal was a very good coach at the time. He was there. And I think when I first turned up, Jimmy Steins, Gary Lyon and Todd Viney were part-time assistants. So we had, it was really well run. Danny Corcoran, if you remember Danny, part of the Eston Footy Club for a long time, was a footy manager at the time. So they had a lot of good people. We had a lot of good people, and it was really well-run club.
You touched on Neil Danaher. Everyone's got a Neil Danaher spray story. Has there been a time where he got stuck into you?
I don't think I might have been one of the good ones. He could give a fair spray. I don't have anything off the top of my head personally that he said to me, but it was more he used to give a good halftime, good spray. I've been in a couple of those. The change rooms before the MCG got cleaned up and changed that. The grandstands got moved around. We were in the old red seats, if you remember the red seats over in the northern stands, and Melbourne and Richmond used to be side by side, and we used to come out of those change rooms and, would come off at halftime a few times, and I still remember a day where all the magnets went flying and spit. I think I was sitting at the front and I felt the spit come over the face, and he could give a good spray, but it was interesting. The best one I ever heard, I reckon, was to Daniel Ward. We were playing at Football Park in Adelaide, and Wardy at the time had to tag Andrew McLeod, and I think McLeod had 11 or 12 in the first quarter, and Wardy was supposed to be tagging. And if people out there know a tagger, they shouldn't be getting that many possessions, 11 or 12 in the first quarter. And I think a quarter time, I think Sauce was getting his calves rubbed, and he walked up to Wardy and goes, "McLeod's had 11," and basically Wardy "Yeah, mate, I know," and then he goes up a tone, "McLeod's had 11," and then Wardy goes, "Yeah." Then screams in his ear, "McLeod's at 11," like absolutely screams. And Wardy's gone all red. And it was just one of those moments that you'll never forget, but kept on. You could give the boys a good spray, but he's a phenomenal coach.
I feel like that group has stayed really close as well. I remember after the D's won the flag in 2021, there was a whole lot of players that got around Neil, and there's a real connection every time they do the drive. How tight are you with that group?
Yeah, it's really strange. It's really it is a tight group. You look through that time, and I think it's broader than that. I reckon Rod Grinter, who's our president of our past players, is fantastic. He's a great networker. He gets all the boys around, and through that period of 21 when everyone was in lockdown and we couldn't communicate, we couldn't see each other. Balls started this past players WhatsApp, and I think we've now got about 400 players on it, and they kept on going along. So Rod's, he's got to take a lot of credit for that. But yeah, Neil's boys, we had a lunch about a month ago at Lamaro's, and there was about 18 guys sitting around the room, and you've got David Neitz, Anthony McDonald, Paul Hopgood, Daniel Ward, Nathan Brown, Andrew Leoncelli, Anthony Ingerson, Ben Holland, Travis Johnson. You know, it's the names that I played with and all probably played. Most of them played in that 2000 grand final. Yeah, we're all pretty tight. You don't see each other and speak to each other all the time, but I don't think I've laughed that hard since I was in the change room back, 15, 20 years ago when we were all together, and we just sat back and each one told a story about our time playing with Neil, and there's some beauties, there's some good stories that were told, and it was a great lunch.
It's a big effort to stay that connected. You talk about the 2000 grand final, obviously your first season. I'm sure you've spoken plenty about some of the earlier finals and your performances there, but what was it like as such a young player being thrown straight onto the big stage, grand final day? Obviously now we know it was the only chance you had, but what was it like as a kid?
Yeah, it was weird. I didn't play a lot of footy growing up, and I made my debut round 2000. And literally I reckon that would have been 20 games of AFL footy. I've literally played my whole life. So it wasn't a lot of footy before I played my first AFL game. And round 2000, we played North Melbourne. And if you remember back late 90s, early 2000s, North Melbourne were Friday night kings. And so I grew up on Friday nights sitting by the fire, or laying by the fire and watching North Melbourne play on Friday nights. And you remember Wayne Careys and David King, Anthony Stevens, Glenn Archer. And all of a sudden, I think Neil let me loose about the second quarter, because back then the bench didn't get on too often, that I'm running out there, and I remember the game, and I remember running out in the ground when I first looking, and I reckon I stared at the lights, the MCG, for the first 5 minutes and literally going, what the hell am I doing out here? And then all of a sudden Wayne Carey flying past, and John Longmire and Anthony Stevens and all these greats that I'd watched on Friday night, and North Melbourne was super side back then, and I'm out there and I think, shit, I better go out and get a kick now. So yeah, 2000, round 2000, I made my debut and ended up playing 20 odd games, and then we played in the grand final my first year, and a bit surreal. It's it's pretty hectic, grand final week and grand final day. So yeah, it was a pretty proud moment to be able to do that.
People talk so much about how obviously the premiership it's obviously what you strive for in footy, but do you look back and is there extra frustration that you didn't win one, or with time you sort of obviously content with the career you've had? What's that feeling like?
I think there's still a frustration every grand final day. I look back and go, I wish it was me. I wish the ultimate is winning. The ultimate success is lifting the cup up, and I never got to do that. I was fortunate enough to play on grand final day, but I never won one. And yeah, there's a frustration with that, and it's not anger. It's more that you get a bit sad and you get jealous. I get jealous come grand final day because I wanted it so much. You train so hard, you work so hard, and you're passionate about the footy club, and I never got to do that. So yeah, you get a bit jealous for sure. And all the finals, I think I ended up playing 12 odd finals, 12, 14 finals. And you're striving for that goal all the time. So it's something that I look back on and go, yep, I didn't get to do it, but pretty proud in what I achieved over the time.
Did the 2021 premiership, you're obviously still tied to the club, did that help, I guess, fill a bit of a void there? Like, what pride did that bring you?
Yeah, huge pride, because it was my first year on the board. And I was thinking, well, my first year on the board, in my first year that I played AFL footy, hopefully it's not the same result that we lose it. But I think I was just like any supporter, proud of our footy club, proud of us to go over there, be away from all our friends and family, and to win. People say, you haven't won it here, but it's harder doing it away. I think they've had to live away for 12 months. They had to play it in Perth. They had to go and live over there. And do it away from all their friends and family, and to be able to pull that off was enormous pride. I reckon I had a few tears, and the greatest thing that I try to explain is that I don't think if you get to do it here, which hopefully we do at the MCG, and we're all there watching the Demons win a flag, but I won't experience that time that you have on the couch with your family, to be able to jump on each other, cheer and cuddle and do all that, because 9 times out of 10, we probably don't sit all together, the 3 boys, or there's, trying to get 5 or 6 tickets now and all sit in one area on grand final day is really hard. So it's, to be able to do that with the family and be so tight and see everyone's passion and cheering it was a fantastic night.
How do you go as a fan now? Are you obviously you're with the club professionally, but is there still that fandom?
I'm a shocking watcher. I hate watching, especially being involved. But yeah, I'm a fan. I'm passionate. And yeah, you still get it. You walk past and I go home and I say to Ollie, I saw track today, or I saw Clayton, or I spoke to Big Maxi Gorn, Wilbur. All those things that you say to your kids. But as we know, when you're in their shoes, that it's nice, and they will retire one day, and then they'll be fans of the club. So it's I am a fan. I love watching the boys play, and get goosebumps every time we win. That's for sure.
Any particular favourite players to watch coming from someone who has been in their shoes?
I think I just love them all. There's no sort of standout favourites. Obviously, because I played with Max, he's to see Max turn up at the footy club and to see what he is and what he's achieved now, it's been an extraordinary effort. He's an extraordinary man, and what he's been able to do and get success for our footy club, to captain the club, to win a flag. What is he? 5, 6, 7 All Australians, BNF winner. Probably should have won a Brownlow, but obviously Ruckman don't win it. But he's a tremendous guy and a tremendous person, and I've got the utmost pride of watching him play.
There's a lot of stories about Gorney arriving at the club. It was 2009. He was drafted. And look, he tells a good story. He gets caught walking to training, having a cigarette, all these sort of things. What was he like as an 18-year-old from your perspective?
I think it wasn't caught walking. I think he was driving down the Monash Freeway was the story. I actually didn't see it, but I think James McDonald saw it. But yeah, he was just a knockabout kid. He probably didn't know the standards that you need to get out to be a professional athlete, and the lifestyle that you have to lead. It's hard. You can't be just a knockabout kid. You are playing professional AFL footy, and that took a bit of time for him, I think. But he always had his fitness was exceptional. He can run all day, still does. So he could always work through that. He's worked at his game. He's always been a fantastic mark. It was probably just his first year or two when I think he had a knee reco that he had to work through. But apart from that, he was he probably turned up and you're thinking, Ruckman take a little bit of time, and I probably thought the same. Is he going to make it? But wow, has he made it?
You spoke about, obviously, your transition from not playing much footy as a junior into jumping straight into the AFL. So it was a soccer background. From about 15, you went over to England. Is that correct?
Yeah, so basically when I was growing up as a kid, I come from a place called Georgetown in northern Tasmania, about 50 k's north of Launceston. And in this town, it's probably a population of about 7,000 people. I used to travel up to Launceston Grammar, going up on the bus every day. And in that period of a kid, I was growing up as an only child. And what I did in summer was I played cricket, and in winter I was soccer. And only because early days my father played footy, but he wasn't, I used to go and watch, but there was nothing for sort of 5, 6, 7, 10-year-olds to play games of footy. There's no Auskick back then. So back then you could play games of soccer. It was like, I think 7 aside, 8 aside. So I played soccer and I loved it. And yeah, I did. I was fortunate enough that I was playing in the state championships for Tasmania. I think it was 14s, 15s, 16s underage. And I was playing in a national competition in New South Wales, up at Parklea. And they had some talent scouts there that thought I was okay, and invited me over to trial at Man United, and I'm looking at him going, it's a bit weird. And then I thought I was grade 10, and I was going into grade 10. It was January, so school holidays, and I was going to stay there for 3 months. And I thought, why not? So I went over in January and trialled out with their youth team, and lived and breathed and did everything as a youth academy player. And what an experience that was.
Do you ever think you could have made it in soccer?
I look back and I A-League wasn't around at the time. There's probably the National Soccer League back then. And you probably think to yourself, I probably could have made that level. I don't know. I don't have any regrets though that I didn't go on with it, because what happened after Manchester, basically what I spent sort of 6 weeks there, and in those 6 weeks I trained and trialled, and I saw David Beckham, I saw Scholes, I saw Giggs, I saw Schmeichel, Cantona, all these superstars coming in and out and living and breathing this lifestyle. And in the end, they sent me down to this place called Walsall. I think they're in the National or Champions League or Div 1 or something now. And they wanted to pick me up and contract me. And that time I was speaking to my family. I'd been away, 15-year-old, been away for 3 months and thinking, I might just come home and finish school. And that's when I sort of got home, and I said, I'll come back once I finish my school and take it up, professionally and really give it a go. But that's when I got back, and, footy sort of come and have a kick with my mates, and I did that, and, the rest is history, really.
It's funny, I've got a highlight ready to show on the screen here of what I think was probably your best goal in the AFL. I'll ask you first, do you have one that sticks out in your mind as a best career goal?
No, not really, but I suppose the ones that stick out to me was the Carlton final. I don't know what this one is, but the Carlton final was a qualifying final in 2000, and I think there was one from the boundary line that with 20 odd points down, and I think I ended up kicking 3 or 4 in that last quarter and get us home. And put us straight into prelim against North. So I remember those, but I think I know which one you're going to play.
Yeah, this one is tapping into your soccer skills. So this is Aaron Davey gives you an absolute stinker handball. This is an incredible finish. So for those that can't see it, left foot, right on the boundary, about 15 metres. It's got no right to go through goalpost height. How do you get that through?
Good question. I think I just threw the left boot at it, hoping it was going to go through.
You can claim the soccer skills there.
Yeah, well, that was the instinct, I suppose. Just basically, when it was tumbling end over end, throwing the boot at it and see what happens, and hopefully it would hit on the right spot, and it did. And I meant to do it. But, sometimes they can go screw-if, and I don't know if the coach would have been too happy if it went out of bounds in the full, but I had to go anyway.
Are you someone that remembers a lot of your games, a lot of your goals? Obviously, there's a lot of cricketers that can remember every score and where they played. Footy, you play a lot of games, you have a lot of kicks. Are you someone that does remember?
Yeah, I can remember most games, but look, I think big moments you tend to remember rather than, the general everyday game. And I think you remember the grounds you play at. I remember playing at the Wacker back in the day. Waverley, I played at an Ansett Cup game at Waverley. So I think you remember, Darwin was very hot every time we played up there. We had a great win up there one year. So I do remember them, but sometimes they're a bit vague.
I've got another one for you here. It was round 14, 2003. So I was 6 years old at this stage. So I was a Melbourne supporter. We obviously met during my time working for the club, but you became my favourite player in 2003. I think I'd gotten a sticker or something in the paper just beforehand. So it was good timing because they were fluctuating the favourite players at this point. But then it was a come from behind win against Carlton at Princess Park. And this was the sealer. You've just slotted it from 50. I think D's were down by 32 points in the third quarter. Do you remember that game?
Yeah, I do. We played a couple of games out at Visy Park. I don't know if it was Princess Park back then, but I do remember that game. We used to go all right out there. We used to have some good wins, but it was. I used to look. I didn't mind kicking a goal. Sometimes I probably over celebrated, but I think that was my soccer background: the celebrations and enjoying and being passionate about kicking a goal, which I think you got to have a bit of fun with.
Another comeback win that's pretty iconic is that Fremantle game, 2008. I think it's probably known as the Austin Wanamiri game. He kicked, I think, 4 in the second half. That was a 51-point comeback. Playing in games like that, what is that experience like?
Oh, it's huge. And you don't expect to, when you're at half-time and you're probably going in at 30 or 40 points down. And when you get up from your big, I still remember, I think the crowd, it was Jimmy Steins and Ozzy's dad, I think there's a famous vision of him, them hugging and crying after the game. But I remember the last bit of the quarter, I think we're all stuck down in their forward end, and the ball, literally all 36 players are nearly over the half, and it comes down and we end up kicking the goal. But look, they're memories that you'll never get back. Winning those games, I think, with all those, the players that you play with is great. I think the best time you could say being a AFL footballer is the first 5 or 10 minutes. So you don't have to worry about anything. You've come off the ground, you've played in front of, the Melbourne faithful, and you get to sit down and embrace and sing the song, and then just go and relax. And it's no beers at the AFL, but you just sit back and have a Powerade and a pizza, and I reckon it's the best time of the week to be able to do that.
Do you have a favourite win?
I always look back at that Carlton game and say that was one of the favourites. There's ones that I remember some bad losses too, but I think certainly there was one against Brisbane too. We had a big comeback at the MCG, but I would have to say the qualifying final 2000. It was pretty special.
I have a unique memory. People think I'm a bit strange. That Brisbane game, I just remember Paul Johnson chasing down Justin Sherman on the wing. I dare say not many people in Australia remember that moment, but for some reason,
I don't.
For some reason, I do. And I think Brad Miller took a mark on the goal square to put the D's in front, and you've just jumped up like both fists in the air.
Yeah.
You talk about the soccer celebrations. I think that was a good moment. But that was probably in the era where the club started losing a lot of games. And so do you get a different appreciation for winning at that point?
For sure, because you're not winning. They're hard to win. You're going into most games as the underdog and you're not expected to win. And, I think Brisbane will probably come to the end of their big run as a side. So, we're going into, I reckon it was the Dean Bailey era. And certainly it was a time where, it's hard to come by. Wins are hard to come by. You look now and, North Melbourne's and the West Coast and the Hawthorns, it's tough to win. And any time you can get a win, you got to celebrate and enjoy it because they're tough. And when you're trying to climb the ladder, it's not easy.
It was probably a good 4-year block for you, maybe even 5, sort of the back end of your career where the club really was struggling. How tough was that day-to-day sort of going into the club, becoming off, 80, 90, 100-point losses? How do you sort of stay up?
Well, you have to be a senior player and a leader. You got to walk in every day, but it is tough. It's challenging. It's rewarding, as I said, when you do get a win. But it becomes a bit of a grind because the AFL world, the media, they're like little piranhas. They're always chapping at the heels to find a story and get something out of what's wrong and why can't we change and why can't we find wins and what's going on. So it can become a lonely place when you're down the bottom. You just got to bond together. You got to stick tight. You got to stay together. The only way out of it's by hard work. You got to get out on the training track. You got to be fit. You got to try and get better with your skills. And it will change. It does change, and you can grow. But the only way you can do it is by hard work.
You mentioned becoming a leader. You took the captaincy in 2011. Was that something you thought at the start of your career that you would develop into?
No, I was captain of a few junior teams in soccer and cricket, and but no, you always have aspirations of being a leader, and people look up to you, and it's nice. It's nice to be recognised as a club captain. I'm super proud of that moment to be able to do that for the great history of the Melbourne Footy Club and previous captains. There's the names of previous captains are Hall of Famers and legends of this game. So it's very rewarding once you get that honour. But it's only done through hard work, and it's not easy either.
Whilst we're in that sort of twilight era of your career, the glove developed. I want to know the reason why. My guess is probably a trial in Darwin when the club started playing up there and conditions were dewy, but you stuck with it. What's the reason behind the glove?
Well, it was probably because of my fingers. I reckon the end one was I dislocated one. I needed surgery on a finger, and I had to glue both of them. Not glue. I had to tape both of them together, and I wore a glove. It was always on my right hand because it wasn't on my drop. So being left-footed, so it was always on my right hand, and I used to always cut the tips out, which made no sense to anyone. And it actually wasn't that grippy. Like it was more. It was a weird thing. I got so used to it that when I didn't use it, I felt naked. If that made sense, that I got used to it just being a glove, and it was part of part of my kit. I had like 10 in the end, spares in my football bag, and I just kept wearing a glove. And yeah, I did cut the fingertips out just so I could feel the ball. But as I said, it was a part of my kit, and if I didn't wear it, I did feel nude, and it didn't feel right. So, yeah, it was full time for the last 3 or 4 years.
I think it makes sense. Like they're not allowed to now, and that's probably because it does help. The last game of footy I played, which I was a terrible footballer, I played a game in school footy in year 12, and I wore a glove just because why not? I don't think I touched the ball, but if I had, it would have helped. Like, did you get a bit of advantage? Do you feel like with the
At
marking
certain
contest?
stages, when it was wet, no, because it was just basically slip, and I was a big grippo man. So I'd get a big chunk of grippo. I don't know if people know out there that grippo it comes from the bowls, lawn bowls where they put it on their ball just so the lawn bowl doesn't get slippery. And grippo is really big in AFL. If people want to use it, you'll see it stuck on people's jumpers or on their shorts. I used to always put it on my shorts and then rub my hands together, and it used to come off. It used to take me hours. Like I'd still next day have grippo stuck on my hands and when that dirty. And so I was a big grippo man, and the gloves. So I loved my hands being sticky because I always wanted to mark the ball. I knew if I was marking the ball well, I'd normally have a decent day playing footy. I wasn't tall, but I could mark for my size, being 6'1" type. Try to play tall and mark the footy. So I found that as an advantage to be able to mark, and I wanted to be able to make them sticky to be able to mark.
You obviously converted a lot of those opportunities, 350 goals, known for your left foot. Is it something you worked on? It's pretty obvious you're going to work on it a lot as an AFL player, but did you put in extra time dedicating the craft, or was it?
Yeah, training was quite. I was regimented with it. I had a routine. I recommend. It's probably still one thing that's not great with our game is goal kicking, and a lot is fatigue and mental, but I had a routine. I knew where I was, mostly inside 50. I knew where I had to run. I knew left footer, I had an arc, and I had my steps counted out, and I found awkward. I knew my steps, and it just became normal. So yeah, I basically was a goal kicker that I was always left goalpost in because I knew that it would hook around and just draw back in nicely. So yeah, I tried. I reckon, but towards the end of my career, I reckon I got worse. That made sense. It doesn't make sense, but I reckon I used to think about it more. Yeah. And the mental side of goal kicking, 45, be on a 45-degree angle, 25 out. I think that used to be like a bogey to me towards the end of my career because I used to tell myself, you just don't miss this. And you do. You just don't kick the ball the same. Where you're young, you don't really care about who's watching you and what does and what ifs. You just go out and play. So I reckon it became a little bit harder as I got older. But yeah, I was naturally, I didn't mind having a shot for goal, that was for sure.
Who are some of the most skillful players you think you played alongside?
Oh, the best player I probably played with was David Neitz. Yep. Exceptional talent. You're looking at, could play both ends, key position back, key position forward. But as a leader was fantastic, and we always knew if Nita was on, it would be either he would do a crunching tackle, hip and shoulder. You remember Luke McCabe, that famous hit that Big Nita did. Yeah, he was the best player I played with. You just could reliable, mark the ball, go back, kick the goal. But you're looking at skill. Adam Uze, Travis Johnson, those types, Jeff Farmer. Wow, could the Wizard play? So, I played with some talented players. Wowie, I played with Wowie in his Brownlow year. Jeff White for the size of him and agility was an exceptional ruckman. But yeah, those skillful players, and then the longevity of someone like a Cam Bruce that would the talent that Brucey had was exceptional endurance, would grind his opponent to the ground. And I reckon it was one year he would have been leading the Brownlow until he busted his collarbone. I think it was Brent Guerrero that smashed his collarbone. So yeah, I played with some talented guys, and we got out. Look, we got a lot out of that side between 2000 and 06. But we came up against some teams. You look at Essendon, exceptional team. Port Adelaide was unbelievable. Brisbane, when they got the three-peat. And I think in those 6 years was sort of a top four team, but come up against better teams.
You speak of Nita. Do you see any comparisons to Jacob Van Rooyen? He's just signed a 4-year contract extension to the end of 2029. Is there anything that you can sort of see in his
there
game as a key
is.
forward?
The ability to jump at a pack and take a contested mark, you do see similar traits. It's the ability now for Jacob to get some easy ball and get separation and work his opponent to the ground and get up and down and do that is something that he's still going to have to keep working at. But I think it's key position players just take time and it's hard and it doesn't come easy for them. But yeah, I think it's fantastic for us to have a Jacob to sign a long-term deal, and I reckon he does jump at the ball really well, and that roo when it goes out in the crowd, it's pretty special.
I've got another random one from your career that I was talking to a mate this morning. I said I wanted to talk to you about international rules, and he said, how the hell do you even remember that he played in international rules? But as a unique sport, and it was quite an interesting sort of period that the AFL went over to Ireland and vice versa. How did you find playing that game?
Yeah, I played 2 games in Ireland and 1 here in Australia. 04, I played international series with Gary Lyon was the coach. So I think Jimmy was on the coaching panel back then. So unique. So 04, and I think I played 10 and 11, 2010, 2011. I thought it would come easier being a soccer player going into the sport, playing both. But the ability to pick the ball up and kick was still, I found, quite hard. But by the end, by 2010, 2011, when I played those 2 seasons, I loved it. It was a great game. You'd love to see it sort of be a composite game that they still play, and you'd love to see both teams or both countries still do it. But yeah, it's a thing of the past, unfortunately. I think COVID sort of ruined all that, and financial restrictions of both countries and leagues and codes. So, but the game itself was very feisty. You're looking at 2 passionate countries, Ireland very passionate about their sport, and playing at Croke Park. Wow, what a stadium! It was pretty special playing over there. And I watched a bit of Gaelic footy over time, and is it hurling? The other sport that they play over there, they're mad. They are certainly. But yeah, I enjoyed the sport, that was for sure.
The game in 2004 kicked off with a brawl. Were you out there? Do you remember that?
Yeah. Well, no, I wasn't. I was on the bench, but I do remember some scenes. I don't remember who was in the brawl or what happened, but I remember flying out and getting there, and James Hird was receiving death threats, basically back then. So it was just some interesting times over there.
Yeah, feisty. Were the trips good bonding experiences? Obviously, you're with people that aren't your teammates.
Yeah, it was great that way. I got to meet a lot of great people, and it's interesting when you're running out as a teammate versus when they're the opposition. And there's some terrific guys that you meet. I think most AFL footballers are great guys. We're all white line fever people that want to go out there and win for our club, and we can become idiots. And people, you can be seen that way a little bit as well. But to be able to go out over there and basically play with some of the best players of all time, and sit down and have a beer and a chat with them. It's nice, and it's special and unique for the game.
Before we wrap things up, Tasmania has got an AFL team. You're a proud Tasmanian. Thoughts on all that? Is it nice to see?
Yeah, very proud Tasmanian. It's an interesting one. It's sort of I think it's taken me a little bit to get. They're very passionate about their AFL footy down there. They love it. I've always thought that they deserved it, but I wanted to know on how they were going to do it. So because I know there's such a divide between Launceston and Hobart, and if you haven't lived down there, you don't know it. It's hard to explain what the divide is, but there is a divide. But I think the state is aligned in. They're all passionate and they all want it to happen. But there is people down there that don't. So I think they will. And I think it's a perfect spot to have it down in at Hobart and at Mac Point. I think it's a great spot. A bit like I went over to Gather Round and with Adelaide, in the way they have really turned the state into a little hub, and you just walk over the bridge from the city to the ground at Adelaide Oval is unique. And you can do the same thing in Hobart, be in Salamanca for dinner and have a beer, and then walk into the ground at Mac Point, be there in 5 minutes. Will make it really special. So yeah, I am a proud Tasmanian. I hope it gets up. And Liberals got in, so they're the ones that said yes. So I think it will happen.
Last one from me. This podcast is called The Watch, which it's an interesting one. Obviously, people have had to go at my watch for a long time now, but it's funny. People also always ask, why do I wear it on my right hand? And I touched on, as a 6-year-old, you became my favourite player. And I wanted to be a left footer. Everything I did, I changed at 6 years old to try to be a lefty. I worked on my left foot. I reckon I got it about 50-50 left to right. Didn't win much of the footy, so it didn't really matter. But I also put my watch on my right hand because I thought, well, lefties have to wear their watch on the right hand. Yeah. And then we met when I was working at the club, and I saw that you actually wear your watch on your left hand, which was incredibly deflating. I thought, I've gone through all of this. It's too late to change now because, you get comfortable with everything. But, a very interesting story behind the watch, which I thought was fascinating.
And the podcast called The Watch. There you go. Well, that's the first time I've heard about that, Ben, about the watch story anyway. But, no, I'd say, I do. I've never been a big watch person, though. But when I do wear one, I wear it on my right hand. Left hand. How am I going? My left hand.
Very deflating. Greenie, really appreciate your time. It's been great to chat all sorts of random things from your time in the footy bubble, and looking forward to catching up again soon.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.